Hi friends, this is Ray. It's the end of December and it's the start of the brand new beekeeping season. So the question I'd like for you to put in the comments is, when do you really consider the start of your beekeeping season? Let's talk today about, does the winter solstice, which is the shortest day of the year, that usually falls around December 21st, mark the start of a brand new beekeeping season? I'm a big believer that the answer to that question is yes, but only kind of. It's mostly symbolic. But let's talk about what's going on inside of our hives this time of year and why a lot of beekeepers consider December 21st to be the start of the brand new beekeeping season. I raise bees in South Carolina. December 21st is about the farthest from the end of the nectar flow during the course of the year as we can get. Once we start getting into the beginning of January, we're much closer to the nectar flow than we are far away from it. Our nectar flow here ends around the beginning part of June, and so we're 6 months away from that. So in that regard, you could say that we're the farthest part, so things are starting to look up and look hopeful. So maybe that's the beginning of the brand new beekeeping season. But for most of us, we haven't even had our coldest temperatures of the year yet. You might not have even had your first snowfall yet. And so thinking about December 21st being the start of the brand new beekeeping season might be a little bit strange, and I get it. So like I said, it's mostly symbolic. And the reason why a lot of beekeepers consider December 21st to be the start of the new beekeeping year is simply this. It's the shortest day of the year, which means as the weeks go on, the days are going to start getting longer. And there's a lot of things that trigger bees build up for the spring. Most of them are related to nectar and pollen and gathering resources, etc. However, one of the factors that research shows that can contribute to the bees is the rhythms of nature. And as the days start to get longer, albeit just a little bit every single day, one of the things that can trigger the bees to start spring buildup is the lengthening of the days. And again, part of this is going to be determined about what part of the country that you live in. But as the days get longer, it indicates to the bees that spring is on the way and the queen will slowly start to gear up. Now, when I raised bees in Vermont, I didn't really experience this to the same degree that I do down here in South Carolina. I find here in South Carolina that it is really true. In January and February, the bees really are starting to gear up for that March pollen and nectar flow that's going to hit us. The same actually holds true for the summer solstice, which is in June, which is the longest day of the year. As the days begin to get shorter after the summer solstice, the bees begin to gear up toward fall and start to concentrate more on storing, no longer as interested in swarming as they were in the spring and working toward that fall time. So both the summer and the winter solstice have an effect on our bees. So what's going on inside of our hives right now? Well, the bees are in cluster. They're conserving their resources over the winter and warming the center of the cluster to around 90 degrees. If the queen is still laying, and she very well may be, especially in my area of the country, there may be some patches of brood inside of the middle of that cluster, and the bees will keep that middle of the cluster, if there is brood, right around that 92, 93 degree mark that we hear a lot about in beekeeping. If there's no bees, the bees actually don't feel a need to keep it quite as warm since it burns so much energy to warm the cluster, and so they'll keep the center of the cluster just a few degrees colder. I think I read one time it's more around 85 degrees if there's no brood for them to keep warm in the center. In the center of that cluster is the queen. And so after December 21st, the queen will possibly, depending on where you live, start to increase her egg laying in order to build up the colony for the spring nectar flow. So even though December 21st is considered by many beekeepers to be the beginning of the new season of beekeeping, it is really just a hopeful point, more of a symbolic start of the brand new bee season. So the question I'd like for you to put in the comments is, when do you really consider the start of your beekeeping season? What date would you put on the start of your brand new beekeeping season? I'd love to see your responses from people perhaps all over the world when you say, my beekeeping season really starts on such and such a date. I would think for me in South Carolina, I would say March 1st is truly the start of the beekeeping season. Maybe a week before if the weather breaks early, the end of last week of February, but typically I would say March 1st is where I would say our beekeeping season really starts. Love to hear from you. Put some answers down in the comment. Tell me when you think your beekeeping season really starts and what state that you're living in.